He lost everything, his purpose, his peace, even his faith. She was running from a past that nearly destroyed her, and a broken dog, trembling in the rain, brought them together on one stormy night. But sometimes, when the world leaves you shattered, that's exactly when God begins to rebuild you. Because miracles don't always come with wings. Sometimes they have scars. Watch The Fire After the Rain, a story of faith, redemption, and second chances. Don't forget to subscribe. The storm came hard and uninvited, clawing across the pine ridges of Evergreen Hill like a living thing. Wind battered the wooden cabins, rain turned the dirt roads into rivers of red clay, and thunder rolled over the valley with a sound that felt like old grief stirring awake. Jack Carter leaned against the doorway of his small repair shop, the glow from a single hanging bulb outlining his broad frame. He was a man carved from endurance, 47 years old, 6 feet tall, shoulders still strong from a life of carrying more than he ever said out loud. His hair, once dark, was streaked with silver. A short beard traced the edges of his jaw, rough and practical rather than stylish. His eyes, a shade of gray that could look either kind or dangerous depending on the light, carried the dull weight of someone who had seen too much desert dust and too many goodbyes. He wiped the grease from his hands, listening to the rain hammering the tin roof. Max lay near the door, a German shepherd of 7 years, powerful but lean, his fur a stormy mix of black and tan. The dog's left ear bore a small tear, a souvenir from service days overseas. Max's amber eyes watched every move his owner made, steady and loyal, but shadows still lingered in them. He had once worked alongside Jack in Afghanistan as a bomb detection K-9. The war had ended for both of them, at least on paper, but neither truly left it behind. Jack took a slow drink of coffee gone cold. Nights like this reminded him of everything he couldn't fix. The brother in arms he couldn't save, the village he couldn't protect. The silence between thunderclaps seemed to press against his chest. He told himself that keeping busy was enough, fixing engines, replacing tires, staying out of people's stories. But beneath the routine, a constant ache lived in him, like a wound that refused to close. Then, through the roar of wind, came another sound, faint but sharp, a horn, short, desperate. Jack froze, head tilting toward the hills. Max's ears pricked instantly. Another blast, closer now, but muffled, distorted by the storm. Jack set down his mug. "Stay," he said, though Max was already on his feet, muscles tense. The dog's instincts, like Jack's, didn't allow hesitation when someone was in danger. Jack grabbed his flashlight, his old military jacket, and stepped into the rain. The cold hit like a slap, but it felt real. Grounding. The beam of his flashlight cut through sheets of water as he trudged up the muddy path that wound toward the ridge. The sound came again, a broken cry swallowed by thunder. Then he saw it. Faint glints of metal below the guardrail where the mountain road curved too sharply. A car. It had skidded off the road, nose down in a ravine, its rear lights flickering weakly through the rain. Jack's stomach dropped. Damn. He looked at Max. "Let's move." Sliding down the slick embankment, Jack grabbed at roots and rocks for balance. Mud coated his jeans, water filled his boots, but his focus was absolute. The car was wedged between boulders, one side crushed. Steam hissed from the hood. Inside, through the fractured window, a woman was slumped over the wheel. Jack yanked on the handle. Jammed. He shouted through the glass. "Ma'am, can you hear me?" A faint movement. The woman lifted her head. She was young, early 30s maybe, soaked in blood and rain. Auburn hair clung to her face, and her green eyes were wild with confusion. My daughter," she gasped. Jack swung the flashlight around. A small shape was curled in the back seat. A child, maybe 6 or 7, tangled in the seatbelt, crying softly. "I've got you," he said, voice steady. He pulled his knife from his belt, shattered the driver's side glass, and reached in to unlock the door. Max barked sharply, sensing urgency, his paws sinking into the mud. "Hold still!" Jack shouted over the storm. He cut the seatbelt and eased the woman out first. She stumbled, clutching her arm. When her knees buckled, Jack caught her easily, surprised by how light she felt, fragile, trembling. "You're gonna be okay. What's your name?" "Emily. she whispered, voice shaking. Emily Ross, my daughter. Sophie, she's still... I've got her, Jack said, already moving to the back seat. The little girl's eyes were wide, face streaked with tears and glass dust. Hey, sweetheart, he said softly, trying to sound calm. I'm Jack. I'm gonna get you out, okay? She nodded weakly. He cut her belt, scooped her up, wrapping his jacket around her. Max circled close, whining low. A sharp cracking sound above made Jack look up. A section of the hillside, loosened by rain, began to shift. We've got to move, he said. Carrying the child and half-dragging Emily, Jack scrambled toward the slope. Max bounded ahead, finding footholds, barking directions like he remembered rescue drills. Mud gave way under Jack's boots, forcing him to crawl the last few feet until he reached the guardrail. He pushed Sophie up first, then Emily. Max scrambled after, nails scraping metal. Seconds later, the hillside collapsed behind them, burying the wreck in a roar of earth and stone. For a long moment, none of them spoke. The rain eased slightly as if exhausted by its own violence. Emily sat shivering on the roadside, her arm bleeding, her eyes locked on the space where the car had been. Jack checked the girl's pulse, steady but weak, then tore a strip from his shirt to wrap Emily's wound. You're bleeding, she murmured. I've had worse, he replied, tying the makeshift bandage tight. There's a truck about half a mile down. We'll get you warm. She nodded faintly, still dazed. When she finally looked at him fully, her expression shifted. Recognition, disbelief. I know you, she said, softly. You were in the papers last summer. The wildfire near Bear Ridge. You pulled those 2 kids out of a burning truck. Jack's jaw tightened. That was a long time ago. They said you disappeared afterward, she continued, voice unsteady. People called you a hero. I'm no hero, he said, almost harshly. He rose, scooping Sophie into his arms again. Let's get you both out of the rain. They began walking down the flooded road, Max padding beside them, head low but alert. Jack could feel the child's faint breath against his neck, and something in his chest ached. The memory of carrying a wounded boy through desert smoke years ago, hearing that same fragile breathing fade away. He blinked rain from his eyes, forcing the memory back where it belonged. Emily limped behind him, her hair plastered to her face, her clothes torn. Despite her pain, she tried to stay close, one hand occasionally reaching toward her daughter to make sure she was still there. Jack noticed the way she moved, careful, as if she was used to shrinking into herself. There was a story in that, but he didn't ask. He never asked. When they reached the shop, Jack pushed open the door and ushered them inside. The room was dim, lit only by the lamp above the workbench. He set Sophie down on an old leather couch and handed Emily a towel. Max shook himself off, spraying water everywhere, then lay down near the heater, keeping one watchful eye on the strangers. Thank you, Emily whispered, her voice raw. If you hadn't come... Jack poured her a mug of coffee and handed it over. You'd have done the same. She stared at him over the rim of the cup, studying him. Beneath the scars and stubble, she saw a gentleness that didn't fit the hardness of his posture. You live alone out here? Easier that way, he said. You don't believe in easy, she said quietly, half to herself. Jack gave a small shrug, looking away. The rain outside began to slow, a rhythmic tapping instead of a roar. For the first time in years, the sound didn't bother him. Sophie stirred on the couch, whispering something in her sleep. Emily knelt beside her, brushing damp hair from her forehead. Jack watched silently, something unfamiliar tugging at him. Envy, maybe, or longing. The way Emily touched the child's hair reminded him of a photograph tucked inside his wallet. A woman and a baby he hadn't seen since before the war. He still carried it, though the faces had faded. Max lifted his head and gave a soft whine. Jack crouched beside him, running a hand through the dog's wet fur. Good job, buddy, he murmured. You still got it. The dog licked his wrist, eyes half closing in quiet pride. Emily glanced over. He's beautiful, she said. How old? 7. Been through more than most men I know. She smiled faintly. Looks like you both have. Jack met her gaze and found it hard to look away. In her eyes there was fear, yes, but also something else. That flicker of life that refuses to go out no matter how dark it gets. He wasn't sure when he'd last seen that in anyone. Outside, the storm finally broke apart, leaving the smell of pine and wet earth drifting through the open door. Jack moved to close it, then paused, glancing back at the two strangers now taking up space in his quiet world. For the first time in years, he didn't feel the urge to send anyone away. "Get some rest," he said, voice low but certain. "You're safe here." Emily nodded, her hand resting protectively on her daughter's small back. Max settled near them, his tail brushing the floor once before stilling. Jack sat back in his chair, watching the last drops of rain slide down the window. Something warm flickered faintly inside him, small, fragile, but real. A light in the storm. Morning came pale and thin through the fog that blanketed Evergreen Hill. The storm had passed, but its remnants clung stubbornly to the world. Branches littered the road, power lines sagged low, and the air still smelled faintly of ozone and pine sap. Jack Carter stood on his porch, a mug of black coffee in hand, watching steam rise from the wet gravel. The old habit of scanning his surroundings never left him. He saw details most people missed: the smallest movement, a flicker in the tree line, a pattern in the clouds that told him more rain was coming. Inside, Emily Ross stirred in the small guest room, her auburn hair tangled and damp from restless sleep. The storm had destroyed her small rental house down in the valley. The roof had caved in under a fallen pine. The local shelter was overcrowded, so Jack had offered a temporary stay. She had hesitated, clearly uncomfortable with the idea of relying on anyone, especially a man she barely knew, but the look in his gray eyes, steady, respectful, distant, had convinced her. Her daughter Sophie still slept soundly in the bed beside her, clutching a stuffed rabbit Jack had found among his old things. Jack wasn't used to company. The quiet had been his shield, and now every soft sound in the house felt like an intrusion. A cupboard door, the creak of floorboards, the giggle of a child. Max, the German shepherd, seemed equally unsure. He had grown accustomed to solitude and discipline, but now he lingered near Sophie as if torn between protectiveness and confusion. That morning, Emily appeared in the kitchen wearing one of Jack's flannel shirts, the sleeves rolled up over her small wrists. The fabric dwarfed her, but there was something dignified in the way she wore it. Her face still bore faint bruises from the accident, and her expression carried that quiet watchfulness of someone who had spent years learning to stay small, to read danger in every movement. "Coffee?" Jack asked, nodding toward the pot. "Please," she said softly, taking a seat at the old wooden table. "Sophie's still asleep. She doesn't usually rest that long." "She's safe here," Jack replied. His tone was simple fact, not reassurance, but it worked. Emily smiled faintly. "Safe," she echoed, as if testing the word. The hours slipped by quietly. Emily helped dry dishes, Max lay near the door, and Sophie woke to find herself in a warm house with pancakes on the table. Her laughter was light, a sound Jack hadn't heard in years. For a fleeting moment, he felt something almost forgotten: peace. That night, however, the old ghost came back. The clock read 2:17 a.m. when the first shout broke the silence. Jack's voice echoed down the hallway, a raw, panicked roar of a man reliving something far away. "Down! Get down!" he gasped, thrashing in the sheets. Max, startled, began barking wildly, his claws skittering against the floor. Emily rushed from her room, heart pounding. Jack sat upright on the couch, chest heaving, sweat darkening his shirt. His eyes darted around, unfocused, until they locked on her. Wild, defensive. For a second, she saw the soldier he used to be, every muscle tensed for battle. "It's okay," she said quietly, holding her ground. "You're home. You're safe." The words pulled him back like a tether. His shoulders sagged. "Sorry," he muttered, running a hand over his face. "Didn't mean to." "Don't," Emily interrupted gently. "You don't have to apologize for dreams." Max crept closer, whining, pressing his head into Jack's knee. The dog was trembling too. Jack reached down, rubbing behind the dog's ears. "He gets 'em too," he said softly. "Sometimes thunder sets him off, reminds him of explosions. We were in Helmand, a bad stretch, lost good men." Emily sat across from him, the lamplight painting her face in gold and shadow. "You still talk to them," she said, her tone not accusing but understanding. "Every night," Jack admitted. and every morning I tell myself to stop. For a moment, neither spoke. Then Emily said, "You saved me and my daughter last night, Jack. Maybe that's their way of speaking back. Maybe that's how they live on, through you." Jack's throat tightened. He wasn't used to words like that, gentle, deliberate, meant to heal instead of fight. He looked away, afraid his face might betray something he couldn't explain. Over the next few days, their lives began to fold together in small, unplanned ways. Emily cleaned the kitchen without being asked, cooked simple meals that filled the cabin with warmth. Sophie followed Max around like a shadow, and the dog, patient and quiet, let her braid his fur with bits of yarn. Jack repaired a broken railing, fixed Emily's car battery, and pretended not to notice the way his house had started to smell faintly of vanilla and soap, signs of another life invading his own. But healing was never a straight line. One afternoon, when thunder rolled in the distance, Max bolted into a corner, shaking violently. Jack froze mid-step, every instinct urging him to yell commands like in the field. Emily crouched instead, her voice soft as rain. "It's just a sound, buddy," she murmured, crawling closer. "You're safe now." Max's breathing slowed. She looked up at Jack. "He doesn't need orders. He needs to know he's allowed to rest." That night, Jack found her on the porch, watching the rain return in a soft drizzle. Her hair shimmered under the porch light, and her eyes reflected the quiet strength of someone who had survived more than she admitted. "You talk to him like you've been where he is," Jack said. Emily nodded slowly. "Different war, same kind of scars." She didn't elaborate, but Jack didn't need her to. There was something raw and familiar in her tone, that mix of fear and endurance. When Sophie's laughter drifted from inside, Emily smiled faintly. "She's the reason I keep trying," she said. "You and Max, you're both teaching me something about trying again." Jack looked at her for a long moment, then down at the steaming mug in his hands. "You make it sound easy." "It's not," she said simply, "but it's possible." For the first time, he believed it might be. Inside, Max slept by the fireplace, his body curled in peace. Emily stood, brushing raindrops from her hair, and glanced back toward the lighted room where her daughter slept safe. Jack watched her go, feeling something unfamiliar stirring beneath the armor he'd spent decades building. Scars didn't always fade, some just learned to live beside new ones. The days that followed were deceptively calm. The storm had stripped the hills of their noise, leaving behind a quiet that felt almost too perfect. Jack Carter spent his mornings repairing what the wind had torn down, replacing fence posts, hammering loose shingles, and pretending that the world had returned to normal. Inside, Emily Ross tried to do the same. She cleaned, cooked, even helped him in the garage, her movements gentle but purposeful. Sophie painted pictures of Max, who lay near the fire with his head resting on his paws, eyes soft and peaceful for once. It felt like healing, fragile, temporary, real. But peace has an expiration date, and for Emily, it came in the form of a dented gray pickup truck that rolled into Evergreen 2 weeks later. Rick Dawson stepped out of it like a bad memory resurrected. He was in his late 30s, but looked older, the years of cheap whiskey and street fights etched deep into his face. His once handsome features were ruined by broken veins around his nose, and his unshaven jaw bristled like wire. His build was thick but sloppy, the kind of strength that came from anger, not discipline. He wore a leather jacket torn at the elbows and boots caked with road dust. His blue eyes were sharp but empty, the look of a man who'd burned through every second chance life ever gave him. Beside him were two others, Troy and Mason, local drifters who took small jobs when sober and caused trouble when not. Troy was lanky, with stringy blonde hair and a jagged scar running across his chin. His constant smirk betrayed a cruel streak. Mason, heavier and slower, had a shaved head and a faded skull tattoo creeping up his neck. They followed Rick the way wolves follow a wounded alpha, out of habit, not loyalty. Rick leaned against his truck, lighting a cigarette. "Evergreen," he muttered, blowing smoke into the crisp air. "Never thought I'd see this hole again." They asked around the diner, at the gas station, the kind of places where gossip traveled faster than weather. It didn't take long for someone to mention a red-headed woman with a little girl staying at the Carter place. Rick's grin spread slow and poisonous. By dusk, Jack was in his workshop, welding a broken muffler, when Max lifted his head and growled low. The sound was enough to pull Jack from his task. He wiped his hands, stepped outside, and saw headlights approaching up the dirt road. His instincts, quiet, precise, kicked in. He didn't recognize the truck, but something in his chest went tight. Emily appeared in the doorway behind him, her face pale. "Jack," she whispered, her voice already trembling. "It's him." The truck stopped 10 feet from the porch. Rick climbed out, swaggering like a man arriving at his own property. "Emily," he drawled, flicking his cigarette to the mud. "Been looking for you. You weren't easy to find." Jack stepped forward, calm but firm. "You need to leave." Rick's eyes raked over him. "And you must be the hero," he said mockingly. "The mechanic who thinks he's a soldier. You keeping my wife warm while I'm out here trying to make things right?" Emily's voice broke. "I'm not your wife anymore, Rick. You signed the papers." Rick's laugh was sharp, humorless. "You think paper changes what's mine?" He took a step closer, and Max moved in front of Jack, hackles raised, teeth bared. "Call off the mutt," Rick snarled. Jack's tone stayed level. "You need to get back in your truck. You're drunk. Walk away." Rick's grin twisted. "You don't tell me what to do in front of my woman." In one swift motion, he grabbed the nearest thing from the bed of his truck, a metal crowbar, and swung it at Max. The sound of steel meeting bone cracked through the night. Max yelped and fell hard, his back leg twisting unnaturally. "Max!" Jack shouted, lunging forward. Sophie screamed from inside the house, and that sound, the sound of a terrified child, snapped something inside him. The soldier who had been buried under layers of civility surfaced. His training took over. Jack closed the distance before Rick could raise the crowbar again. His left hand caught Rick's wrist mid-swing, twisting until bone popped. His right hand drove forward, landing a punch that sent Rick reeling into the mud. Troy rushed him from the side, but Jack sidestepped, slammed an elbow into his throat, and dropped him gasping. Mason hesitated, a single moment of uncertainty, but swung anyway. The blow grazed Jack's ribs, sharp pain blooming there, but he ignored it and drove a knee into Mason's gut. "Enough!" Emily cried, clutching Sophie, tears streaking her face. But the chaos drowned her out. Rick, blood dripping from his nose, stumbled to his feet and pulled a knife from his belt. "You think you can take me, soldier boy?" Jack's vision tunneled, the knife glinted, his instincts screamed. He pivoted, grabbing Rick's arm and driving him back into the truck with a sickening thud. The knife clattered to the ground, but in the struggle, Rick's elbow caught Jack's temple. Stars exploded in his vision. He staggered. Rick saw the opening, landed a hard blow to his jaw, and Jack hit the ground. Rick's boot came down once, hard, before the sound of sirens finally cut through the madness. "Cops!" Troy rasped, clutching his throat. "We gotta go!" Rick spat into the dirt, grabbed his jacket, and hissed. "This ain't over." They piled into the truck and sped off, taillights vanishing down the road. Emily ran to Jack, kneeling beside him. His face was bleeding, one eye already swelling, but he pushed himself up. "Max!" he groaned. The dog whimpered by the steps, his leg bent wrong, fur matted with blood. Jack crawled to him, voice breaking. "Easy, boy, easy!" Max licked his hand weakly, his loyalty unbroken, even in pain. The police arrived minutes later, led by Deputy Clara Jensen, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense voice. Her uniform was soaked from rain, and her blonde hair was tied in a tight braid. She'd known Jack from the old wildfire rescue. "You're bleeding again, Carter," she said grimly. "Tell me what happened." Jack just looked toward Emily and Sophie, both trembling, both safe. "It's over for tonight," he said quietly. "That's all that matters." But as the ambulance carried Max away, Jack knew deep down. It wasn't over. It had only begun. The smell of disinfectant lingered in the hospital room, sterile and faintly metallic. Jack Carter stirred under the thin white sheets, his mind surfacing slowly from the fog. The steady rhythm of a heart monitor pulsed beside him, steady, patient, reminding him he was still alive. When he tried to move, pain flashed through his ribs, a sharp reminder of the night he'd tried to stand between violence and the people he cared about. He opened his eyes to the washed-out ceiling tiles and for a moment couldn't remember where he was. Then the pieces returned. Rick, the fight, the sirens, Max's cry. His chest tightened as the memory replayed. All his life he'd fought battles, in deserts, in jungles, in alleys half a world away. But this one had been different. This one had been personal. The door creaked open. Nurse Haley Cooper, a woman in her mid-30s with light brown skin and tired blue eyes, entered with quiet efficiency. She had the calm, brisk manner of someone who'd seen too many broken bodies and learned to treat each with equal care. Her auburn hair was tied back under her cap, and her voice carried a warmth that contrasted the cold room. "You're awake," she said, adjusting his IV. "Took a few stitches and a couple of bruised ribs, but you're lucky, Mr. Carter." Jack tried to sit up. "The dog," he rasped. Haley smiled faintly. "The German Shepherd? He's tougher than you are. He's at the vet clinic across town. Miss Ross has been there every day." At the sound of Emily's name, Jack's pulse kicked. "She's okay?" "She's fine. Came by this morning. Said she'd be back once the dog could stand." The nurse paused, watching him. "You two been through hell, huh?" Jack gave a humorless half smile. "Seems to be a pattern." When Haley left, the silence returned, and Jack stared at the rain streaking the window. He felt hollow, not from pain, but from realization. For years he had lived like a weapon waiting for orders, a machine for survival. But now, lying in a bed built for healing, he wondered if he'd ever truly learned how to live. 2 days later, the door opened again, but this time, it wasn't the nurse. Emily stood there, framed by the morning light from the hallway. She wore a gray sweater and jeans, her hair loose around her shoulders, eyes softer than he remembered, but rimmed with exhaustion. In her arms was Max, wrapped in a blanket, one leg bandaged but tail wagging slowly. Jack's throat tightened. "Hey, buddy," he said, his voice breaking slightly. Max's ears perked. The dog gave a soft bark, as if to say, "I'm still here." Emily smiled, setting him gently at the foot of the bed. "He's walking again," she said quietly. "The vet said he's healing faster than expected. I think it's because he knows you're okay." Jack reached out, scratching Max's fur with trembling fingers. "You did good, soldier," he murmured. "Better than me." Emily sat beside the bed, her movements careful. "Don't say that. You kept us alive." Jack shook his head. "I fought. That's all I've ever done. I don't even know how to be anything else." Her gaze was steady, kind, but firm. "Maybe you don't have to fight anymore. Maybe it's time to believe in something better. You can stop fighting, Jack, but don't stop believing." He looked at her, really looked, the small scars on her hands, the faint bruise near her temple that hadn't yet faded. She wasn't talking about him. She was talking about herself, too, about all the things they'd both survived. Later that afternoon, Deputy Clara Jensen visited. Her presence was solid and pragmatic, a badge of order in a world that didn't always make sense. "Got some good news," she said, flipping open a small notepad. "The forensics team matched the knife Rick dropped to 2 other assaults in Oregon. We've got a warrant out statewide. You gave us everything we needed, Carter." Jack's jaw tightened. "You'll find him." Clara nodded. "We will, and when we do, this ends right." She closed her notebook and glanced at Emily. "You're both under temporary protection until then. Stay in town." When she left, Emily turned to him. "She said we," she murmured. "Not you. We're part of this now." Jack exhaled, a weary smile ghosting his face. "Guess I don't get to be the loner anymore." That evening, the sun broke through for the first time in days. Golden light spilled across the sterile room, catching the edges of the IV pole and the silver threads in Jack's hair. Emily stood by the window, watching the sky. Max slept at the foot of the bed, his chest rising steadily. Jack stared at them both, the woman and the dog, who had somehow broken through the armor he'd built over decades. He felt a quiet shift inside him, small but irreversible, like a door opening after years of rust. Maybe he didn't deserve peace, but maybe peace didn't have to be deserved. As the last light of day faded, Emily turned, her voice soft but sure. "When you're ready," she said, "we'll go home." Jack nodded slowly, eyes closing. For the first time, the word didn't sound like a place. It sounded like a promise. A year had passed since that night when the past came clawing back, and the quiet hills of Evergreen had slowly learned to breathe again. The garage that once sat half empty now buzzed with the sound of engines and laughter. A new wooden sign hung above the entrance, its letters hand-painted by a local carpenter. Carter and Ross Auto and Rescue. Beneath it, Smaller letters read, "Fixing more than engines." Jack Carter stood near the open bay door, wiping grease from his hands with an old rag. The years had not softened his frame, but they had eased something in his face. His hair was more silver now, but his eyes no longer carried that constant haunted distance. The lines around them deepened when he smiled, and he smiled more these days. Beside him, Max trotted with his familiar limp, proud and alert, wearing a red vest that read, "Assistant Trainer." He was 9 now, still strong, though a little slower, his muzzle graying just like his master's. Inside, Emily Ross worked at the desk, handling customers with the same calm warmth she used when she treated wounded animals. Her hair was shorter, easier to manage, and her posture no longer carried the stiffness of someone afraid to take up space. The small waiting area smelled faintly of coffee and motor oil, and a calendar on the wall was pinned with adoption photos, dogs, cats, even a hawk once rescued from a trap. Sophie, now 8, darted between the rows of parked cars, holding a leash attached to a small brown mutt with oversized ears. She wore a denim jacket 2 sizes too big and had the same sharp, curious eyes as her mother. "Come on, Peanut," she laughed as the puppy tried to chase Max's tail. Emily looked up from her paperwork. "Careful, honey. Max doesn't play fair." Max gave a patient bark as if in protest, then lowered himself to let the puppy climb over him. Jack leaned against the doorway, watching the scene with a kind of quiet pride. The garage had become something more than a workplace. It was a sanctuary, for engines, for animals, for souls that had been running too long. In the back lot, an old man in a brown hat was unloading crates of dog food from a truck. His name was Henry Gable, a retired forest ranger with weathered skin and kind gray eyes. Henry was tall but wiry, his frame marked by years outdoors. He volunteered twice a week, helping Jack with rescues in the wooded areas around Evergreen. "You sure this is enough for the month?" he called out. Jack grinned. "Depends how many strays you find hiding behind those trees, Henry." The old ranger chuckled, brushing rain from his hat brim. "They keep showing up. Guess they know where the good people are." As afternoon light filtered through the clouds, Emily stepped outside, bringing Jack a cup of coffee. "You've been working since dawn," she said. "Even heroes need a lunch break." Jack took the cup with a soft laugh. "Heroes don't have mortgage. Payments." "Still," she said, nudging him playfully, "you could take a day off." He looked out toward the hills, where the forest shimmered with new growth after spring rains. "I did," he said quietly. "I just didn't notice it looked like this." They stood in silence for a moment, listening to the wind rustle through the pines. Emily slipped her hand into his. A small gesture, easy, familiar. It had taken months for her to learn that she could touch without fear, and months more for him to accept that touch without guilt. That evening, the first real storm of the season rolled over Evergreen. The sky bruised purple and gray, and the sound of thunder drifted through the valley. Inside the house behind the garage, the lights flickered once before steadying. Max paced near the window, ears twitching, old fears whispering through his instincts. His nails clicked softly against the wooden floor. Jack knelt beside him, running a steady hand through his fur. "Hey," he murmured, voice low and sure, "it's just rain." Max trembled, but his tail wagged weakly. Jack smiled. "We're safe now, buddy. All of us." Emily came from the kitchen, wiping her hands on a towel. The smell of soup filled the air, and Sophie sat cross-legged on the rug, drawing something with colored pencils. A picture of their house, the garage, and 3 stick figures standing beside 2 dogs under a blue sky. She looked up. "Is Max scared again?" Jack nodded. "Just remembering, that's all." Sophie set down her pencil, crawled over, and hugged Max's neck. "It's okay, boy," she whispered. "You're home." The dog sighed and pressed his head against her shoulder. Outside, the rain beat harder against the windows, but inside the little house there was warmth, a steady hum of quiet, of safety, of belonging. Later that night, after Sophie had gone to bed, Jack and Emily sat together by the fireplace. The flames cast soft gold light on the room. A framed photograph rested on the mantel, Jack in his old uniform, standing beside Max in his prime. Next to it was another, the 3 of them, smiling, with the garage sign in the background. Emily looked at the first photo, and then at Jack. "Do you miss it?" she asked gently. He thought for a moment. The service? He shook his head. I miss who I thought I was there. The purpose. But maybe I've got a better one now. She leaned her head on his shoulder. You've saved more lives here than you ever did out there. He smiled faintly, watching the fire dance. Maybe, he said. But this time, I'm not saving strangers. The rain eased, and outside, the wind carried the scent of wet pine and gasoline, the perfume of their new life. Jack rose, stretched his back, and looked down at Max sleeping by the hearth. The dog's breathing was slow and even. Sleep easy, old man, Jack whispered. We made it. For the first time in a long time, the storm passed without fear. In its place, there was only light, soft, golden, and alive. Sometimes, life's greatest miracles don't come in blinding light or thunderous signs. They come quietly, like the warmth of a hand on a trembling dog's head, or a broken man learning to laugh again. The story of Jack, Emily, Sophie, and Max isn't just about survival. It's about redemption, about how God can take the ashes of pain and shape them into something whole, something good. When the storms come, and they always do, remember that no darkness lasts forever. There will always be a dawn, and sometimes that dawn shines through the people we least expect. A stranger's kindness, a loyal dog's courage, a single moment of forgiveness that heals more than words ever could. If you've ever felt lost, forgotten, or too broken to start again, let this be your reminder. God still works through the quiet hearts of ordinary people. Every act of compassion, every second chance, every spark of courage, they are His miracles among us. So tonight, as you close this story, take a breath and whisper a prayer. Not just for Jack and Emily, but for all who are still fighting their silent battles. May God bless you and guide you through your storms. May He bring peace to your heart. And may He remind you that you are never truly alone. If this story touched your heart, please share it with someone who might need hope today. Leave a comment below telling us which moment spoke to you the most. Don't forget to subscribe for more stories of faith, healing, and second chances. And may the Lord bless you and your loved ones. May He bring you light after every rain.